here so she can leave. Nelson County Service Authority permit fees. Jennifer, we just wanted you to hang out a little bit longer.
So I'll reintroduce myself. I'm Jennifer Fitzgerald. I live at 174 Capitol Mountain Lane. I'm representing the Nelson County Service Authority in the request to waive building inspection fees associated with the Wintergreen wastewater treatment plant and the Skylar wastewater treatment plant projects. Both projects are under consent orders from DEQ and must be completed within a reasonable time frame, which is both of them should be completed by 2023. Both projects directly benefit the environment and improve water quality in Nelson County and all the way to the Chesapeake Bay and beyond. The new plants will provide reliable wastewater treatment to meet the current and future regulations. As you know, any debt that we incur ultimately is passed on to the customer. By waiving the fees, Nelson County can assist the Service Authority in keeping the rates as low as possible. The Service Authority is required by our funding agencies to provide full-time inspectors by our engineering firm. We also have a specialized geotechnical consultant working on both projects. We have budgeted to pay for the engineering, paying the engineering firm for engineering and inspections, which is right at $1.5 million for the Wintergreen project and $159,000 for the Skylar project. On top of that, we're being charged building inspection fees by Nelson County. The Wintergreen contractor pays $70,194.17 for inspections, and the Skylar contractor has been quoted $11,123.10 for inspections. I feel one inspection team that knows the plans and looks out for their best interest is sufficient for the project. It should minimize the inspections needed by Nelson County and definitely not warrant the costly fees. If we were to add both inspection fees together, we'd be paying $1,566,194 for Wintergreen and $170,000 for Skylar in just inspections. So we want to have you guys reconsider us having to pay those fees and possibly waive them.
All right. Staff, did you have any comments on this?
I guess as Jennifer mentioned, the $70,000 has already been paid, so that would require a refund should the board decide to approve that. And those fees are required to be charged by the building inspections department. It doesn't directly pay for their inspections. So I don't know, it might be just a little misleading to say that they're paying, both fees to be inspected twice. And it's our building officials and inspections office duty to perform inspections that are required of them by code. I think the $11,000 I don't think has been paid yet, so that could just be a fee waiver. I just think if this was a consideration, maybe it should have been brought up before the projects were awarded. Contractors build these fees into their proposals and their bids. That's just typical. So, but it is, of course, up to the board to decide.
So currently at this time, I guess the Wintergreen project that permit has been paid?
That has been paid.
Has been paid. So I guess that money would have been paid by English. Okay.
Yeah, in figuring the building permit fee, they also incorporate bond mobilization and insurance, which is over $400,000. But like Andy said, maybe the inspection fee doesn't really include inspections. I'm not sure what it includes, but if you're looking at the breakdown of the base bid for the project itself and the things that are incorporated in it, the package plan comes already constructed, doesn't need inspections. It's been put together based on plans that were provided by the engineering firm. So,
I think, and this is just a thought process, if we were to do some kind of reimbursement, that it could be earmarked for other projects that the Service Authority might have coming up. Because essentially, if we were to waive it, we don't want to give this back in English. There's just no ifs or buts about that. We also don't want to encourage $70,000 in change orders from English because now they see they got it. You know what I mean? And you guys have any major capital improvements coming up? I'm sure you do. 70,000 or less?
Well, we'd like to get some grant relief for the line in the sky, the sewer line in Livingston.
Sure.
But that is something that we're waiting on our funds for.
What was the total cost for that?
I think it's right at $150,000.
Yeah. Well, I think that'd be a great approach.
but that's not in our current budget, and that is
Right.
just a rough figure.
Right. I just wanted to note that there was a meeting when these projects went over budget. There was a meeting with Mr. Carter at that time, and while there wasn't any request on behalf of the service authority at that time to look at the inspection fees as part of some relief, it wasn't something that was offered on either side. So Mr. Carter didn't offer that at that time, and probably it wasn't appropriate at that time to bring it up.
No, we approached Mr. Carter and also went agreement or to help us with the fees. Well, the overall shortfall that we had from the estimate of what we had going into the pre-bidding until after the bidding, and then the bids came in over $3 million. It was $3,486,567 over budget. So when we did approach him and also went agreed to help us out with those, we didn't receive any.
And Jesse brought up a good point. If we were to refund the fees on the Wintergreen project, that money would be returned to English, who
They paid it. So
paid it. And then how might that get back to the service authority in terms of reductions? Do you understand my question?
Yeah, I understand your question.
Yeah, the one thing that I can see happening is if we return it, there's gonna be, in 2 weeks, you're gonna find a $70,000 change order. I can see that, and if they know the money's there that we just created, there's a good chance that could happen. Because they're the ones who do that money. That is definitely correct. It's not the service authority that's due that money. And I think that's something that we should, deeply consider is, I get it.
Well, it seems to me that, I'm certainly in favor of waiving what fees we can and returning what we can, do. But it would be good to find out ahead of time, I think, on the Wintergreen project, if that money was going to be returned to English, would that then be deducted from the overall cost of the project, or would it revert to you, or would they revert it directly to the service authority? I think that's a really important question to find out what that change is going to happen.
Yeah, what I would predict would happen is, because in any project of this scale, there's going to be change orders, and you guys normally price in 5%, 1 to 5%, something like that, of the overall project. It would more than likely go towards something of that nature. But typically, that has already been financed in the pro forma. Normally, you finance in your contingency.
we have 5% confusion.
Yeah, so they would have to say, so they've already got their overage priced in. So, I'd be hesitant to give 70 grand back there. However, I could easily look at you today and say, how about we just give them 70 grand for Livingston tomorrow? That just so happens to be that number.
If there's a way to hold it, then sure.
Yeah, I don't question that money's theirs. I think, as a contractor, I can feel fairly confident saying if the contractor paid that money's not yours, it's the contractor's. And if you guys have already priced in contingency, there's no sense in adding more to the pot, because those numbers would be, they're going to use, you typically get as close to that 5% as possible. And I get that. I appreciate that.
Well, if we propose to waive the fee on Skylar,
That would
and that would be about 11,000, and then maybe Candy could discuss with you, or come up with a scenario that would make sense for for the fee regarding Wintergreen. Just to come up with something that that makes sense, that doesn't end up in in the pocket of the consultant, and doesn't accomplish what we want to accomplish.
Right. And I understand the scenario. We don't want taxpayers charging taxpayers, it's a pot of money circulating at the moment. So I can see we need kind of a better solution in the future, but, also costs are costs, and, we want to make sure that we're doing the best due diligence. I think that's a conversation you staff can have internally. But as for waiving the Skylar, I think that's appropriate at this time since the money's been procured or used.
Yeah.
Okay. What does the board think about that? Waive Skylar and let staff communicate about the winter green.
Well, I'll make that motion.
Okay.
Okay.
Motion
I'll motion
just
that
for the
we,
Skylar.
that the permit fee, the inspection permit fee for the Skylar wastewater treatment plant be waived by the county, and that county staff work with Source Authority staff to consider the best way to deal with the $70,000 fee that is connected with the winter green project.
Second part of the order, correct? Motion be yes. All right, we got a motion, we have a second. If we get a second, we can go to discussion.
I don't fully understand what's going on.
Okay. So what we were discussing was the $70,000 that was a permit paid by English Constructions in Nelson County. We have said to ask our staff, meet with Water Authority staff to discuss what that potentially could be used as. That's more of a directive. There is a motion currently to waive the permit fee of the Skylar waste plant to the building department, so that that's some costs that they can utilize for the project or another project.
The reason for that, which Ms. Fitzgerald mentioned, was that there is a $160,000 permit fee that's already included as a requirement in the financing. And so CHA has been given already that amount of money to do the inspections on everything that has to be set up for Skylar. So although the building department is required to, to charge the permit fee unless we waive it, the amount of work they would have to do in terms of actually issuing the permit would be minimal, because the Skylar project is produced in one piece, and all you do is set up a foundation, you're done. Why am I right about that? Because it's all pre-packaged, it's pre-packaged and pre-inspected basically. And then once you get it there and get it turned on, yes, they have to sign off on it, but the ongoing inspections that would normally happen with something of this size, the county's required to charge $5 per every $1,000 over 5,000 for the,
Yes.
for what they're doing.
We're charging the taxpayer more money by adding more money.
Yeah, so basically they're being charged for a fee that is duplicative both financially and realistically for the most part, not totally. But, and then it would also serve, assist the service authority and help keep rates from having to be increased and all that kind of stuff, because the project, both the projects, the Skylar project was what, $850,000 over budget?
Right.
Is that right? Yeah. So.
That was the motion.
So where is the 70,000?
That is going to be internal discussion with our two staff. That's, we ain't able to really touch.
We need to, I think what the motion needs to do is to focus on the permit fee for the Skylar project, and staff can consult and try to figure out the best way or the best proposal for dealing with that $70,000 and how it should be dealt with in the event we would vote to do such.
Because when you come back and tell us what you did.
Yes, yes. We would bring back a proposal for use of the 70,000 for the board to.
Yeah, for some other project problem.
Good. So I can amend the motion to just to waive the building permit fee from the building inspections for the Skylar wastewater treatment.
Okay, we have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Carr, any discussion?
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, I just feel like we're changing horses midstream, and where did we drop the ball that we're having to have these conversations now?
Sure.
That's my question, was this on the contractors' side, was it on the county side, was it on the service, I mean, why are we doing this now? You know, it's like planning your bus routes after it starts snowing.
I would easily say that the Skylar one, we're ahead of the game. It's the Wintergreen one, we're 6 months behind the conversation, no doubt. And that might be something that our staff need to discuss about how we handle it.
I just would not like to see us having this conversation again. I mean, that's
Oh,
something
yeah,
that should be
totally.
addressed up front. I mean,
Yeah.
I would think.
I would agree. I think that, that a piece of that, since I serve on the Service Authority Board, I'm kind of familiar with this, is that, that making requests of the county to decrease fees has been something that's not looked upon as something that's necessarily a good idea by our county administration. And so in the discussions that happened with county administration, that was not an option that was brought up at that time. And at that time, it may have not been appropriate to bring it to the board because it was kind of, I think, premature. You had to go through, you've got to go through the channels that you've got. And certainly the intention was that because it was over budget, could the county help?
Right.
And so.
And these fees are calculated on typically the total cost of the project. So it's kind of arbitrary in a way. It's like, so all of a sudden you get hit with another $400,000 in surcharges. Well, now the permit fees going to reflect that. And again, you're taxing the taxpayer essentially twice in a way. One in a long-term financial scheme, and just doesn't make any sense. All right, so we have a motion, we have a second, any discussion? Hearing no discussion, let's just, motion was to waive the building permit fees for Skylar in regards to the wastewater treatment facility. Building permit fees for the water authority.
For the full amount, the $11,123.10.
Correct. Okay, motion, second, we're in discussion. Hearing no discussion, we'll do a roll call vote. Amanda?
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Mr. Harvey?
Same.
Mr. Parr?
Yes.
Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Rutherford?
Yes. Great, so you guys go ahead and you'll have your discussion. Thank you, Jennifer. Moving back to the VDOT report. Sorry about that, Robert. We just wanted you to hang out a little bit longer and have a longer drive back to Charlotte Courthouse. But you know what? Actually, sit back down. We're gonna go on to the salary. I'm just kidding. No, it's a joke. We're wearing you out today.
I got a little something going on with my shoulder. And a little pain. I was putting my thumb at it with Barbara. This sport has shown itself to be very unpredictable. No, this is fun. Just want to give a board a short report. Wilson Road, Rural Rustic, we just about finished that. That's been surface treated this week, hard surface. The next Rural Rustic we're going to is Camel's Mountain. I think they should start on that next week. Our state forces, we are going secondary routes. We finished the primary, force back to Board 4, but the way the grass and leaves are growing, we'll probably have to cut that again. We usually wouldn't cut it again until Labor Day, but I think we're gonna have to do it before then. The debris pile up at the Nelson Wayside, that's been ground up by our contractor. They've not hauled it away yet, but I assume that's gonna fall pretty shortly.
What are they doing with that? Where's it going?
I don't-
It's looking great.
I'm sure he's gonna try to sell it. It's his.
Oh, okay, it's.
It's his, it's not mine.
Upload.
Well, if you want some, just do it. But no, again, it's our intention, once we get that pile cleaned up, we've got another pile of sand and rock and suitable material. It is our intention to clean all that area up and do permanent seeding and just get it where that would not be a disposal area or a site storage yard or mobilization yard for contracts. It's just too much going on up there right now to have that activity at that location. So hopefully that's gonna happen. I don't know if any of you had a chance to go to Tower River Road, from 60 out to 29. We did an extensive amount of work on the edges of the pavement to allow us to put a center line on that road. We received a lot of inquiries on the center line, but we had to widen the pavement a little bit to get the pavement wide enough, but we did widen it and got the edges fixed, and that road's probably in better shape than it's been in a long time. And it has a center line on it and then get some positive feedback from that from some citizens. Other than that, I don't really have anything else. Don't have anything else to report.
What is this, Reed's Gap draft we got right now? That truck restriction over there headed towards Sorrento?
That is the truck restriction for Augusta County. You know, we did it on our side. And we did the restriction. Now Augusta County is doing their restriction.
Good.
And it does involve a little short section of, what was it, Route 814?
Yeah. That's good. That needs to happen.
Okay.
All right. Any questions for Robert at this time? Skip?
I know you're aware of this, and, you know, I won't transfix on it, but I look at all the dead ash trees.
Yeah.
And many of them are right on the road. Who is responsible for those trees that are right on the road?
Well, if they're on the right of way, we are responsible for them. If they're leaning, even if they're off the right of way and they will fall in the road, we're still taking those down.
Are you,
Yes, we're
would you
taking
like
them
me
down. I
to
don't,
tell you where those trees are?
yeah, shoot me an email with the locations, because I don't know, it was, they weren't ash trees, it might have been one ash tree, but there's 4 trees over there near Nelly's Ford on 151 that they're gonna take down, saying that a couple big dead sycamores over there, right on the road. There was 2 more, now one of them was a ash. So yeah, we'll take them down, I look for them. So, if you see one, you'll just shoot me an email with the location.
Second thing, Thai River Road, you know, the underpass under the railroad. 2 weeks ago, another tractor trailer came from, you know, and didn't see the sign and went there and tried to back up on, and this time did extensive damage to a property right there because,
Knock that white fence down.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
which
Is there, I mean, I know the sign is there, I've been by it, but you know.
I mean, you want me to put up?
I don't know why, you know, I
I mean,
mean,
really,
I can understand, you know, it's almost like a joke between the 2 of us now, because it happens, you know, you can count on it, happens
yeah,
every
I
3 or 4
mean,
months.
it's unreal. And there is no answer to it, Mr. Warren. I mean, you know, we've reviewed that signage twice, I know, and we're still going through there, and, I don't know what to, and then, some things you cannot fix. Just like I was talking to, some folks in Amherst, but over the Bright plant, there's still trucks going through 600. It's been restricted for years. And they still going through there, and, what else do you do? I mean, the only thing we might could do, Mr. Warden, is use the internet. We haven't put up any of the international truck restriction symbols, because that might register with some of those folks that can't speak English or understand.
The only thing that I can see is where you have the sign where they can turn left and go toward Amherst. There are trees and foliage around that, and somehow make it more, visible.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sympathetic.
I know what to do, I mean,
I mean,
I think if we haven't, to me, over at Grayson, we put up the international truck restriction symbol. I think that helped. All the other stuff we've done over there, I don't think it helped. But I think an international truck restriction symbol.
The other thing, there is foliage to be cut away.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that would help, I think.
We can do that. Well, we should be doing that anyway.
All right, Mr. Harvey, Mr. Reed.
I've got a question. I don't want to tie up a whole lot of time with this, but here's the question. For multimodal transportation across, along the 29 corridor, where you've got these two proposed J cuts for both Livingston and at Route 6. If bicycles at some point want to take that route, do these J cuts kind of take bicycles out of the equation for being able to cross there? Because of the J cuts, or the bicycles have to take the same J cut route, obviously, they can't go straight through.
They should go straight through.
Yeah, they have to use the J
Yeah, they
cuts.
have to do the same thing the rest of the tracks do.
Right, so is there any information that you have that has to do with what the effects of J cuts are on potential future, bicycle traffic during in those areas? Because there are proposals out there that may or may not be part of our comp plan, I don't know, but people are starting to ask me about, well, is this something that can be done? And I said, well, I'm not sure.
I don't know, but we can certainly try to find out.
Thank
You mean our cuts or J cuts?
Our cuts.
Our cuts, how's it say?
They sure look like the same thing.
Yeah. Sorry. Mr. Parr.
So we talked about going across Virginia, Roosevelt Road. Any additional information on that?
Well, basically our conversation, I mean, it needs to be, the vegetation, the bonus needs to be cut back, it's trees and then ain't all that around. They did mow it, the conventional mowers, but we need to get in there with our surface all buzz bars and just really open that thing up because it's no one lane through there is all it is without as far as the widening, same thing we talked about earlier, I can see us doing some widening down there, on the, where the river or creek, goes up against the highway. We need to build a little more shoulder right there. But for widening the roadway, other than that spot, it's not very, it's pretty good alignment coming down that hill.
Yeah, it's just, in
And
that spot, some shoulder work would help. It's just with the Piney River Trail head, the second trailhead being right there, that road's getting a lot more traffic.
Right.
And then with people passing in there, especially like you said, in that one spot, it's pretty tight.
but what I saw when I looked at it, that registered most of me was, the sight distance is not good coming out of there, looking back toward Piney Road. When you come out, right out of the road.
If 56, right at the stop sign.
Right,
Right.
church. It's a bank there, and it's a dead, I think it's a dead tree right there, a big oak tree right there. And, that needs to be gone to get better sight distance.
I mean, that would be nice as well, but the main concern the residents have is the width of the road back as you get further and closer to the trailhead.
Yeah. Kind of where we're headed.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to mention it.
Yeah.
In front of everybody.
All right. I do not have anything at this time. I have obviously had a lot of concerns about the Arcot in Livingston, as I have indicated in writing, that, it's not a done deal just yet. We're all getting through the process of hearing and seeing if any grants are successful. So just be cognizant, the public it continues to curious. So at what point are we gonna have the public hearing? Is that gonna be closer to 2030 or 2025? I know we had mentioned that before.
Well, that should be about 18 months after preliminary engineer stuff.
Gotcha. Okay. Great. All right. If you're hearing no other questions, have a safe travels down south. Thank you. All right. Moving on to, this is one item I think didn't need to be on the Livingston Fall Festival street closure. I've been in contact with some folks in our community, talking about hopefully doing something in downtown Livingston, which may involve, shutting down the street for a little bit. We've done this prior. I remember we used to have a bike out or something of that nature. Mr. Nix had, and I can't remember which church was that put that on. So hopefully we'll have some more things to talk about there. I don't believe at this time there's any actions the board has to do to assist with that. And we can skip over that, or unless you know something I don't.
I mean, I think our understanding is the board needs to just direct that the street be closed for that particular purpose on that date.
That Parks and Rec does with the application. We have to submit that application.
We have, okay, so I had spoken to them and I think there was some, do we have to do it this month or next month? Because I think there were some changes recently.
I guess we can find out how much time is needed to get the permit process.
Because the stakeholders, there's been some discussions and there might be some adjustments. So,
Okay, we hadn't gotten that.
okay, yeah, sorry, I didn't notice. Yeah, thank you. That's why nobody's here. All right, so if we could just skip over that for now, moving on to property acquisition financing, or 2022-43.
I'm just going to do the introduction of this. As the board remembers, we had our financial advisors issue an RFP for a bond anticipation note for the property acquisition that we're in the process with, and we have Roland Cooch from Davenport here to discuss those results with you. And Paul Jacobson is our bond counsel, and he will just kind of run through the documents that the board needs to approve by resolution in order to effect the financing. So, Roland?
Nice to see you again, sir.
Thank you, Candy, for the introduction. Mr. Rutherford and members of the board, it's great to be here in front of you again today. I am pleased to be here to talk about the results of the RFP process. As you're familiar with, we did go through a lot of planning on this, and it ultimately culminated in the land purchase and land acquisition financing here that you see today. We did set out a proposal, an RFP for proposals for bank financing on behalf of the county. We sent that out to approximately 100 different financial institutions, local, regional, and national financial institutions, and we requested proposals for a bond anticipation note. That is a short-term financing that provides you the ability to close on the land, also think about the next steps for the land in terms of the use of it. We asked for 3-year rates and 5-year rates to give you a little bit of duration to think about the timing. It's the board's discretion as to which rate we'd like to choose. We did ask for 3 options here. Tax exempt, what we call non-bank qualified. That really is today's market when we think about it. Bank qualified doesn't really give you any benefits over and above what would be just a regular tax exempt rate. Option B was taxable. We know it's going to be a little bit more expensive in terms of the rate, but that allows you to think about a myriad of purposes, both governmental purpose as well as non-governmental purpose for use of the land. And option C, which is sort of a hybrid. We asked that, we thought about that as being a potential option. It did confuse the banks a little bit, so that leaves a little bit of negotiation to undertake there if we choose an option C. But as I'll talk about on the next couple of pages, we don't think that we need to go down the option C route, given the flexibility that we have in the proposals. On July 6th, we received 2 proposals, very good proposals from the following banks: American National Bank and Trust Company, and First National Bank. Truist Bank also submitted a proposal. We didn't include it in this at the time. It came in very late and was more expensive than both of these, so we didn't feel necessary to include that in the mix here at this point. Proposal comparison on the next page, just to show you what the key terms are with respect to the proposals. First National Bank offered the county with the ability to prepay. First, let me talk about the bank council fees. In addition to the closing costs that we contemplated, bank council fees that we have in the budget as well, they're proposing to charge and not to exceed $5,000 for that. We factored that into all the numbers you see here, so it's not anticipated to add to what you see in this analysis. But the really good thing about First National Bank is it allows for prepayment anytime without penalty and whole or part. So you can pay part of the land off, part of the acquisition financing off, if you choose to use part of it in a certain way, keep part of it outstanding, subdivide the land if you need to. The other piece here that we're talking about, which is a flexible option C, again, we're not really too high on that because of the way we can really go about this financing on a tax-exempt basis. But that would be something to be determined down the road in terms of what that rate would be. So if option C was the one we wanted to go with, it would lead to a little bit of interest rate change, not only from tax-exempt to taxable, but the market can change as well. The last 2 points that we wanted to highlight under both of these proposals, they both contemplate the plan of finance that we talked about through the EDA. You've done this before with respect to the school financing, so it's not out of the norm. This would be a lease revenue type financing, subject to appropriation, with the county's moral obligation to repay. That's a standard approach under the Commonwealth of Virginia's financing mechanisms through EDAs or IDAs. Both financings contemplate that. The American National Bank and Trust, one thing we wanted to point out with the prepayment penalty, they do have a 1% prepayment penalty, but only if it's refinanced or you try to refinance it for interest rate savings. That is to say, if you try to refinance it to reduce your rate, they'll charge you a 1% penalty. But if we refinance it with long-term bonds, or if we pay for it outright in cash, they won't charge you that. The last thing here, again, with the option C, they were a little bit reluctant to provide a commitment on option C, so that is a to be negotiated concept there. The interest cost comparison on the next page, we've provided basically a 3-year look at this and a 5-year look at it. And the tax exempt rates that we wanted to show you here with respect to First National Bank and American National Bank for the 3-year, we're looking at about 296, exactly 296 for the 3-year tax exempt cost of funds for First National Bank. American National Bank is a little bit more expensive at 322. And again, this is on the same basis for the not to exceed amount of 2.6 million. You can see that difference is from roughly from about 77,000 to about 84,000, roughly about a $7,000 a year annual difference in terms of the cost. And as we go to the taxable alternative, that is to say, if the county decided to do a taxable alternative for the most flexibility in terms of use of the land, then you can see how that steps up to about 375 or 395, depending on which one of these you look at. But we think the First National Bank is the most cost competitive when you look at the cost of funds here. The other consideration is if you think about going to a 5-year note, that is to say you have 5 years to really think about the planning, get your permanent financing concepts and a decision made down in that 5-year range, then we're looking at the First National Bank proposal going from 296 to roughly 3.12%. So the 5-year spread of time versus the 3-year spread of time, you can think about it costing you about roughly $4,000 a year in terms of that additional flexibility for time. And when you look at it across the board, the taxable, it's a little more expensive there, again, about $4,000 on the first approach. So where does that leave us in terms of our interpretation and our understanding? Yeah. Based on these proposals, we would recommend the First National Bank based on the rate, the cost of funds, the flexibility. We would also recommend pursuing the option A, which is the tax exempt approach. The question then becomes to the county, 3-year or 5-year in that respect. Option A, we think we recommend going with that because ultimately First National Bank allows you to prepay it anytime you want, so you have the ultimate flexibility from that perspective. A little bit of schedule down here, we've got July 12th board meeting today, direction from the board, seeking direction from the board, and approval of resolution. Also tomorrow, we've scheduled the EDA board meeting for the approval of their documents. And looking at the balance of July, and we, through late correspondence last week, we're closing on approximately August 4th. That's shifting out just a little bit due to the nature of finalizing the last real estate related items on the land itself, including the survey. That's the upshot, the summary of my presentation, and I'd be glad to take any questions.
Certainly. And I think one thing I said, can you go back to the slide showing the options 3-year, 5-year, and next? Yeah, so as I've kind of looked at this, they only do charge interest only, correct?
Yes.
So it's interest only over the course of 3 to 5 years with a no prepayment penalty. You know, I do concur that First National Bank with the option A is the best idea at this time. Obviously, within that 3 years, we have to have a bond on the back end, correct?
Right.
So within that 3 years, we have to bond conversion of some sorts. Otherwise, we have to prepay it at the conclude. We have to pay it off at the conclusion of the 3 years.
Correct. You're exactly right, Mr. Rutherford. We think with that 3-year time frame, that gives you essentially, we'll talk about the first half of that, first 15 months, 18 months, the planning, getting ready, everything to go. Ideally, you want that bond ready to go, queued up before about 6 to 8 months before that final maturity date. That way, you're not worried about, okay,
we're going to utilize some cash. Great. Any questions at this time?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
does the board need clarification on what tax exempt or taxable refers to?
Is there any, yeah, sure, if you would like.
Okay.
Sure, and maybe I'll turn it over to Paul for a little bit more nuanced discussion, but tax exempt rates are generally lower rates with respect to your cost of borrowing. That primarily, the reason why you get that, benefit of that is the use of the land would have to be governed in terms of IS laws, tax laws to be governmental purposes. Taxable, higher rates, again, but there's no restriction on what the use could be.
Sure.
Flexibility is your intent or change could shift. Now, I'll turn it over to Paul to talk about the actual resolution that we think about, and he can talk a little bit more in depth about it as well.
I'd just like to add one thing too, in discussing this with Roland, the final note that we do, whatever project results on this property, does not have to have the same tax exempt or taxable basis as bond anticipation note.
Okay.
You can change
that
direction at
if
that point.
Okay. Reasonable.
Good afternoon, I'm Paul Jacobson, a lawyer at the Sands Anderson Law Firm. We've been your county's bond counsel for a number of years. Good to be with you today. To follow up on the discussion of tax exempt versus taxable, governmental versus private use. So the tax exempt means that you're intending to use the property for governmental purposes. I know the recreational center and other governmental purposes have been mentioned, the county offices, etc. Private use would be the business part, I understand, where you have private businesses. That would be the taxable rate. We understand that that's not intended at this point. So you would have to you'd be committing to that certainly for the term of the note. Again, it sounds like the 3 years is under consideration. But it could be paid off, and again, there's flexibility in the future. If the use changes, then and you can make it as complicated as you want. You can say, well, part's going to be used for one purpose and part for another purpose. If you have two different financings, but again, that's all in the future because I know that the board hasn't. You don't have specific plans for specific portions of the property at this point, but the tax exempt would involve the pledge in terms of governmental use. The resolution you have for you, that's the only action the board needs to take for the financing. The only official action is the adoption of the resolution. The resolution will approve all of the appropriate documents. As mentioned, closing, this would be probably a simultaneous closing with the purchase, so that the financing, like often when you buy a house, you close on the financing at the same time you buy it, when it becomes available, etc. This is financing structure, so to speak, is through the Economic Development Authority, and as Mr. Cooch mentioned, we've done this a number of times before. The pledge is the real estate, involving the leases. That's the collateral, so to speak, which is why there are leases involved. The county buys the property, leases to EDA, gets leased back to the county. Your lease payments are identical to the debt service, and that's what is used for the debt service during the term of financing. The resolution, somewhat lengthy, but it does talk about the project, purchasing of the property. It mentions First National Bank. That's the bank. That was the assumption that because they have the lowest rates, that would be the board's choice. Gives you the flexibility. If you all would indicate in a motion, I guess, the preference for the 3 years versus the 5 years, that would clarify as we move forward, and would certainly help the EDA tomorrow to know that's what the board's intent. The resolution approves the plan for financing the project. Speaks of the county's moral obligation, subject to annual appropriation type of financing that Mr. Cooch mentioned. Accepts the proposal from First National Bank. Makes appropriate covenants and promises regarding the tax-exempt nature of the loan. Authorizes counties, representatives, employees, officers to take any and all actions that are needed to move towards closing. And as indicated, we're looking at probably an early August closing, and been in touch with Mr. Payne, the county attorney, in terms of coordinating the property purchase with the financing closing. So we are, I believe, on track for that. As we're just really waiting on a survey. Knock on wood, that seems to be almost done, and with that, we should be in pretty good shape to pull everything together in the next 2-3 weeks.
Great. All right. At this time, does the board have any questions for our folks here today in reference to 3-year, 5-year, option A, option B, C?
Could you explain option C again? I understand A and B.
Right.
C is.
Okay, so option C was in the RFP as bank, give us your proposal, starting out tax exempt, but then what would your conversion rate be if it turned out that the county changed its mind and wanted to use property for different purposes, and we ended up having to then do taxable financing because, say, I'll just leave it at that. And the responses back were, well, hard to know, this and that. How do we know that the county's changed its mind? And the response is, well, there would have to be resolutions, action by this board and the EDA board as well. And I think what we ended up with was pretty much, certainly with the taxable financing, you have all the flexibility in the world, and even with the tax exempt financing, because First National Bank says you can prepay, you can refinance at any time without a penalty, it ends up being more or less the same thing under option A. So, and the bank said, well, even if we did see it, it'd be based on some formula. We can't give you any particular rate, and of course, whatever rates they come up with in the future would be based on, I don't want to speak out here, but they'd be based on that formula anyway. So that's just.
So does option C allow conversion and option A not?
Well, the bottom line, it comes out to about the same thing, because with option A,
the First National Bank, you can convert to taxable financing anytime you want. You just have to go out and either, it could be the same bank, it could be a different bank, and pay off this loan and replace it with another one. That would be the conversion.
Okay, but option C allows conversion, and according to the table, the rates are the same.
If I can clarify, option C allows conversion. They give you a formula, but it's based on where the market is at that time. So we don't have a locked in. We don't go from this 296 to the 375 today. We can't know that. So we think that given that sort of nuance that they have, and they have a little bit of question or hesitancy about it anyway, when we spoke to both the banks, and both of them said, put this in here, but we didn't, we've got to really think this through. When you go with option A, in the final analysis, Mr. Rutherford, you're right, when you go with the option A, you could effectively do the same thing. You could prepay it, you could refinance it. If the permanent financing has to be taxable, you could refinance it on a taxable basis and change things on the property. So you really have all the flexibility you want by the nature of the ability to prepay it.
And you get a rate lock, as opposed to a float.
So you get a floating one with option C?
Option C in that proposal would be floating
Okay.
at that time.
All right, here, thank you.
Okay.
So it's the same today, but it won't be tomorrow. This option.
Got
Okay, so did you have anything else? Any further questions for our folks here today?
Would you recommend having a knowledge of Nelson County for 3-year or 5-year?
That's a hard question, but when you look at the math between 3 years and 5 years, it's really a very small difference. So why not? I mean, our thing would be, our recommendation would be why not take the 5-year? Gives you a little more flexibility with respect to making decisions, going through the plans, and really positioning it for that permanent financing. But if the alternative is, if we've got the next 18 months really mapped out and we know what's going to be on that site, then 3 years should be sufficient.
Do you have any feelings for us?
I like the flexibility that the 5-year plan gives us. It gives us a little more time for planning strategy as far as what the board wants to see and what direction you'd like to go in. And you can always prepay it
Right.
if you're in a position to do so sooner.
And there's no prepayment penalty. So we could go with the 5 and let's just say 2 years, we've decided to make an action. And hopefully that would be the case, is that we're being, ambitious about which directions we're headed down there. And I'm trying to see the 5 year. The only difference with the 3-year and the 5-year is you do have a little bit heavier cost on the annual interest rate. So that'd be approximately about $5-6 grand, something of that nature a year. If you maintain option A. I'm fine with the 3-year note, but, it's kind of the board's decision. So I think we can all agree First National Bank is probably the option. Option A is the one we want to go with, and we need to know if we want to go 3 or 5 years. So let's just kind of get a general idea of where everyone's at in their minds.
Candy says it would give us more, I would go for the 5-year.
Okay, you want to go for the 5? Just rewrite it.
I agree. The thing about a 3-year note is that it would put our decision more on the front burner, and it would become something that we would need to move on maybe sooner instead of later. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but having the flexibility to choose whether to do that, since we're in the middle of our comp plan and everything else, 5 sounds.
All right, 5. Hey, where you at?
And because the comprehensive plan and where we are in that, I say 5.
5, all right. So let's go on ahead and get a motion to approve option A with First National Bank on a 5-year note as presented. Can we get a motion to that effect?
I'll make a motion to that effect.
Or Candy, did you have something to add?
I was just gonna say, can they just adopt the resolution with those 2 caveats?
Right, I think the motion would be to adopt the resolution with the understanding this is option A, 5 years, 5 years.
All right, so we would need a motion to approve resolution R 2022-43, First National Bank, option A, on a 5-year note.
Oh, is it 43 or 45?
It's 43 or 45? My
It's
bad.
43,
43.
45 will be next.
Gotcha, okay.
All right, so
So
can
moved.
we have a motion from Skip to that effect? Do we have support?
Second.
Second from Mr. Parr. Any further discussion? Hearing no discussion, we will do a roll call vote since this is a finance thing.
Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Farr?
Yes.
Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Rutherford?
Yes, great. Moving on to item E, we had to do an addition beforehand. That would be, what is it? Approval and acceptance of contract of purchase for real estate R 2022-45. Kenny?
Okay.
Safe travel to you guys. Thank you for coming.
So the board previously authorized the county to move forward with executing a purchase contract with Wells Fargo Bank. And part of the purchase contract requires a second approval from the board following the study period, in which time we completed the title search and we're 99% finished with the Alta survey. Preliminary results of the Alta survey didn't show any overlaps. It did show 2, I think, encroachments onto the property line, which we had discussed with the board previously. Those are the same items that we discussed with you in executing the original contract. So right now, we just need to adopt this resolution to satisfy the requirement in the purchase contract, and then we send the resolution to Wells Fargo Bank so that we can meet the parameters and continue with the purchase.
Do you have a copy of that resolution? I don't have it right here. On page 164, on the digital. Yeah.
And
All right.
Mr. Payne stepped out, but he could answer some questions, any questions you have as well. But
Okay.
it's pretty much a
I'll,
formality of the contract.
And I'll read the resolution as it is for the board at this time. It would be Resolution R 2022-45, Nelson County Board of Supervisors authorization for acceptance of conveyance. Larkin Property, Wells Fargo Bank, trustee, resolve that Nelson County Board of Supervisors does hereby approve and accept the contract of purchase for real estate with Wells Fargo Bank and a trustee for the Thomas D. Larkin Jr. Trust and the Thomas D. Larkin Senior Trust for the parcel being designated at tax parcel 67A39 and containing a total of approximately 309.586 acres. Be it further resolved by the Nelson County Board of Supervisors that the county administrator, Candace W. Gary, and county attorney be and hereby are authorized to accept the deed of conveyance thereof. So it's a fairly simple resolution. Is there any questions for Candy or Phil relative to this resolution at this time? If there is none, can we get a resolution to approve R 2022-45 as was just presented and read?
Yes.
We have a motion from Mr. Barton. Is there a second? Second from Mr. Harvey. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, we will do a roll call vote. Amanda?
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
Mr. Farr?
Yes.
Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Rutherford?
Yes. All right. That shows that it reflected unanimously. Moving on for more business, our FY 22-3023 salary classification system.
All right, usually in July, the Board of Supervisors will approve a resolution approving the salary and classification system, which resolution outlines the basis of employee raises and how that will work, and also includes attachments A and B, which are the county employee salary scales, as well as that of the Sheriff's Department. The proposed resolution, 2022-44, does incorporate several changes for the board's consideration this year. So we have several proposals for the board's consideration. First, we would like to mirror the school division's establishment of a $15 per hour minimum wage for all part-time, and then an annual equivalent of $31,200 for full-time employees. And this would include constitutional offices and registrar. We'd also like to propose an entry-level compensation adjustment for law enforcement and public safety dispatchers in order to address critical vacancies and improve employee recruitment and retention. We think any resulting compression issues within pay bands that are proposed could be addressed with consideration of the forthcoming pay study. We would also like the board to consider some other proposed recruitment methods. The first item in considering the $15 hour minimum wage or $31,200 annually equivalent, this change would affect 20 positions and would combine grades 1 through 10 into a new pay band 1 on the proposed pay scale. Pay bands 2 through 14 would have the same salary ranges as grades 10 through 27 on the current scale. We did have one anomaly where the position of the senior transfer station operator would have to be regraded to maintain the same level of differential between it and the transfer station operator. Employee compensation adjustments would be based upon the higher of the minimum hourly rate or annual equivalent, or an increase of 5%. The estimated salary and benefits cost of doing this is $88,870 and is primarily due to the increase to part-time wages. These costs could be covered by the FY23 employee benefits line and supplemented by recurring contingency if needed. However, we think it can be absorbed within the current budget. The second proposal regarding public safety dispatchers, we currently have critical vacancies of 42%, and there's a 10-week training period for these employees before they can actually begin dispatching calls on their own. Our dispatchers are working 12-hour shifts, many of them working overtime, and Russell Gibson is also filling in to dispatch on shifts, and we have a significant employee burnout is occurring. The consultants on our pay study, MAG Inc., advised me that the market study would likely dictate a starting salary of around $34,000 for public safety dispatchers. And the proposed salary today is $34,010, which matched up with the grade 12 on our current scale. The senior dispatcher position was rebanded using the same differential between them on the FY22 scale, starting at $35,708, which would be a new pay band 4. There are 10 full-time positions affected by this for a salary and benefits cost of $61,701. Some of this would be offset by state compensation board reimbursement for those dispatchers that are funded by the state. The monthly salary and benefits savings of these 5 vacancies is currently $17,535. These costs, the $61,701, can likely be covered by vacancy savings until we get fully staffed and absorbed within the current FY23 budget. This is very hard to read on the screen, but this is the current pay scale. Let's see. All of these positions, grades 1 through 10, are all below the minimum $15 an hour wage for part-time, or $31,200 for full-time, or $32 for full-time. And the scale currently has 27 grades. This is what the revised scale would look like, combining the first 10 grades into the first pay band. Then after that, unless otherwise marked here, the blue, the public safety dispatcher, the senior transport station operator, and the senior public safety dispatcher. The rest of the grades would all remain the same as the current pay scale. And just the number of pay bands would be reduced to 14. Any questions so far? If not, I'll move on to the law enforcement.
Any questions for Candy before we move on to law enforcement?
And we can always come back.
Yep.
All right, for law enforcement, we have critical vacancies now of 28%, and there's a 12-month training period for entry-level deputies. We'd like to establish a $46,000 per year entry-level deputy positions, including courthouse security, which would eliminate the differential between uncertified and certified deputies. And speaking with Sheriff Hill, who's here today, he said some other localities were using this, and they were able to attract and retain entry-level people more readily by eliminating the differential between the certified and uncertified. And I should just point out that the new state minimum is $42,000. The law enforcement pay scale, which is attachment B, you'll see in a minute, was revised to maintain an equivalent differential between grades as on the FY22 scale, using the $46,000 as the minimum. Law enforcement employee compensation adjustments would be based upon the higher of the minimum annual salary or an increase of 5%. So our net estimated salary and benefit cost of doing this is $43,067. This is derived by taking the total salary and benefit costs of roughly $114,000 and subtracting out the estimated state compensation board reimbursement for these positions of $51,424 to get the net estimated cost.
I don't know that. There we go.
So the monthly salary and benefit savings of 6 deputy vacancies right now is $34,635. So we think these costs can likely be covered by vacancy savings until they get fully staffed and absorbed within the FY23 budget. This is a copy of the current attachment B, which is the Sheriff's Department scale for full-time deputies. So this scale has a courthouse security position at grade 7. It also has an uncertified deputy position, and then it has the entry-level deputy in courthouse security, which is the certified position. So our proposal is to eliminate the courthouse security and deputy uncertified and start everyone at the entry-level deputy in courthouse security at the grade 9 at $46,000. This is shown here on this scale. This is the new proposed scale, which would begin at $46,000, and then we adjusted the other grades by the same differential as is on the current scale between the grades. There are some other implications of making these adjustments to think about. These cost calculations do not include overtime pay that may be worked at the higher rates of pay. Dispatch will continue to have overtime until higher staffing levels are reached. In FY22, our dispatch overtime amounted to about $64,000. In FY23, there should be a lesser fiscal impact of the compensation study should the board choose to implement that just due to making these adjustments now. And then next fiscal year in FY24, our salary and benefit costs will be higher due to these adjustments if approved and compounded by any salary percentage increase approved for FY24. Those are things to also consider. Some other recruitment methods that to consider that we have discussed amongst ourselves. Offering sign-on bonuses, which would be non-recurring funds. This is being used in other jurisdictions for hard-to-fill vacancies. Freezing one local deputy position and using those recurring funds to recruit quality non-entry-level DCJS certified deputies, which would fill vacancies faster and provide immediate relief for the department. This would provide about $55,412 for this purpose and would require board approval given it's a local deputy position. So questions and discussion, and then possible consideration of resolution R22-44, which would include all of these adjustments just discussed and revised pay scales. And like I said, Sheriff Phil is here. I believe Dr. Gibson is still here for questions regarding their.
Sure. What is the total budget impact that would have on recurring, if any?
Let's see. Like I said, I think most of the items can be absorbed within the budget.
Okay. Within the current vacancy.
Correct.
Okay. Great.
Let's see.
Hopefully this will, the was a 28% vacancy in law enforcement. That's a serious number. And we need to, it should be addressed that.
It is, Sheriff Phil, do you have
You want to speak to anything on that?
No, it's a statewide. When I go to conferences and go to meetings with other agencies, we're all in the same market. We're all trying to get the most highly qualified people to serve the citizens, and it's becoming more and more difficult. We can't lower our standards. That's key. We cannot do that, but getting good qualified people, and I love to have people that live here in the county work for you all. And that's even more difficult now, just because of the cost of living in Nelson. There are deputies that live outside the county and that commute here. But any help you all can do will be greatly appreciated. As Ms. McGarry stated, the funds here that is presented is within the budget that has been approved using vacancy savings funds. Freezing the one position, the county paid position, will allow us to recruit. At times, I'd say on an average year, we lose three deputies a year. So we're always having a vacancy. I've seen that the last 6 years or so. So being able to use that money to recruit people that are already certified would be a big bonus.
All right, board, what is your wish? My suggestion will be approve R 2022-44 as presented. We have a motion, Mr. Harvey, do we have a second? Need a second.
I'll second.
Second for Mr. Reed, any discussion? Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to bring something up. You know, the discussion that we just had and the presentation we just had, we could have just substituted the word teachers for deputies and support staff. And it's frustrating for two reasons. One, clearly we don't have jurisdiction over how the school budget pays, you know, their staff and support them. We can only give them so much money to work with, whereas we get to do this directly. And that's a problem. It provides an inequity that that is something that I think is a problem that we should look at very closely. The other thing is the timing. If we were having discussions, if it was within our jurisdiction to have, in our purview, to discuss school staffing, deputy staffing, administrative staffing at the same time, we would have the ability to have true parity across those. If we wanted to have a certain minimum wage for support staff, we could do that. Wanted to have a certain entry-level staff, you know, salary, we could do that. While I'm totally in support of this, and while I know that it probably isn't a good idea to resurrect our budget for next year, and it probably isn't a good idea to start working on next year's budget now, although we could consider it. I'm just thinking that that we should. I think that it would be a good thing, and I would certainly be in favor of it, of the board trying to achieve parity across all of the divisions, all of the staffing, and all of the employees that actually are, you know, paid for with county revenues, to try to deal with the, you know, with the inconsistencies where if we approve this, as I think we should, we're going to be a year behind trying to give that parity across the board. And when we did discuss the school budget, one of the things that you did bring up was having parity across the board was something really important if we were to allow the schools to increase their minimum wage to a certain level that it would put pressure on everything else in terms of recurring revenues. And I understand all those things. You're totally right in bringing those up, but it's a problem that puts the schools behind, they have a different route to get funded than everybody else does. And it puts them in a position of having less ability to advocate for their staff than what we're dealing with today.
Motions.
I'm sorry, I was just gonna, piggyback on what Mr. Reed said. So, it's my intention to work more closely with school board staff to talk about these things during the year leading up to the budget process so that we can kind of all be on the same page and we can establish things that won't, promote, county staff leaving to go to school board positions because they get paid $1 or $2 more an hour. Those types of things. I think these are things that we can definitely work on and work towards, because I definitely agree with what you just said.
And I have full confidence in the next budget cycle that our staff and these boards will have very equitable conversations. And my preliminary discussions with Ms. McGarry as well as Dr. Hester is that everyone is very optimistic about what the future looks like in this coming budget cycle. So we have a motion, we have a second.
No,
You want more discussion?
Yeah. I appreciate the discussion that we had and the information that was given. And like Ernie said, it reminded me of the discussions we had about the schools and about their needs. And after that discussion about their needs, we were so moved that we offered or voted for another $1 million that they could make, to help solve some of their problems. Now, I think at that time, well, next day, of course, when we voted to take away the $1 million, my excuse was my daughter was having a crisis and I wasn't really thinking about that. And I don't think it's too late to meet the needs of the schools if we think about it. I mean, I really, the reason I said the thing is I really believe that the $1 million, where we got that $1 million from was a bad idea. I admit to that. But I also think that the money was critical and the money is there. And I would ask you, Candy, to continue to think about that it is within our ability to make more money available to the schools this year, not wait till next year. Yeah, we have to, what you said, and I'm in favor because I think education offers far more to our community that we are willing to admit. And the possibilities of what we can offer to our community through education is real. And even though what Jesse says about next year is true, it's really not too late.
So can I just put this out there? I was just gonna say, in this proposal, we're using some of our vacancy savings to cover these increases within our current budget. The schools has their own vacancy savings within the current budget that they have, that they could so choose to do the same. I'm just putting that out there. So they have the money to do what they want to do, they just need to make the choices to do those things. It's within their purview to make those choices.
Yeah, and we need to talk about those things rationally and need to do a much better job. Because like I said earlier, the opinion of the board always was that they had always given money, as much money to the schools as they needed. As a teacher there for over 30 years, I know that it wasn't true. I mean, we had really important needs that were not met.
All right, so back to the original motion and second for our 2022-44 to approve as presented. We have a motion, we have a second, we're in discussion. We done with discussion? Okay, let's go ahead and do the vote. Amanda?
Mr. Harvey?
Wait, I don't think.
We're
I don't
voting
know,
on-
hold on,
Sheriff's
this is the motion for sheriff deputies pay and staff, county, we're not talking about a school budget motion on this one. This was just a motion for the pay salary of deputies and staff and such. Okay, so you'd like to change your vote to yes? Okay, all right.
We could have Amanda reread the motion.
Amanda, can you reread the motion for us?
Okay, so we had a motion to approve the FY 2022-2023 salary, as presented in the resolution. Mr. Harvey made the motion, Mr. Reed made the second.
That's for our 2022-44.
That's 44.
Yes.
And this is for county, okay? So is your motion still there, Mr. Harvey, to approve as presented? Yes, about deputies and dispatch.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Reed, is your second still there?
Yes.
Okay. Let's just do the vote one more time.
Okay.
Okay, motion to approve R 2022-44 as presented. Okay.
Are we ready for
Yeah,
a roll
do it
call
again.
vote?
Let's do this one more time.
Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Mr. Parr?
Yes.
Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Rutherford?
Yes. Okay.
Thank you all very much.
All right. Let's go on to reports real quick. County Administrator report, Candy.
I've seen a lot of you today.
Yeah, it's been a long day so far.
So I'll try to be fairly quick. So you all got my report via email. The first item is COVID-19, the update as of July 8th. Based on a 13-week average, there are 2 new cases of COVID-19 and the 7-day average of new daily cases of 3.6 cases. To date, the county has had 2,782 cases of the virus and 36 deaths. We are still on the low risk status as of right now, or as of July 8th. So Russell Gibson and I attended the June EMS Council meeting where operating policies and logistics of dispatching certain types of calls was discussed. The need for VDEM hazmat training was discussed, and it was noted that the squads would also be cleaning up their active roles by fall. It was reported that EMS agencies were spending more time on federal parkland than in the past, primarily for search and rescue injuries. And the Park Service does not have any responsibility for these or any responsibility to contribute resources towards this. So lobbying for funds for this was mentioned in that discussion. Also noted was the order of an electric car battery extinguisher at a cost of $29,000. This reduces the extinguishing times for electric vehicles from around 12 hours to around 3 hours. This apparatus would be housed in a central location for use by all fire departments, and an application for an interest-free loan to pay for this was also discussed within the group. They also talked about radio interoperability, with it being noted that the state RIO system was being updated, which should help this within the county. They also said that extra frequencies or attack channels were desired. The comprehensive plan, the project website of www.nelson2042.com has been launched, and the citizen survey is available for completion until August 15th. Public workshops will be held on July 13th at the Nelson County High School, starting at 5:30 p.m. The next one's July 20th at Rockfish Elementary School at 5:30 p.m. And then the third one is August 3rd at the Nelson Heritage Center at 5:30 p.m. All citizens are encouraged to complete the survey and attend these public workshops. As far as the Piney River Water and Sewer System, the Simcoe Pump Station, we're still waiting on the delivery of an ordered VFD, which is a variable frequency variable frequency drive, which operates the pumps within the pump station. There's one pump fully functioning, and the second one is awaiting this VFD to be installed. Our opioid litigation settlement, Mr. Payne was notified that the county would be receiving its allocation of year one payments of the opioid settlement funds in the amount of almost $6,000. This was 0.147% of approximately $4,066,000. These funds must be used for opioid remediation as defined in the distributor settlement agreement, and will need to be reviewed. That agreement will need to be reviewed to see the use of those funds. Larkin property acquisition, we pretty much took care of all that during session previously, and our closing on the property purchase will likely be August 4th, if not August 5th. So, repair of the termite damage within the courthouse near the the circuit court judge's office. We got pricing by JL's president, that's Jamerson Lewis's president, Wayne Cook, of $15,500, which includes a $3,000 allowance for mechanical, electrical, and plumbing work to relocate any utilities in the work area. They indicated they could do the work between September and November. And then recently, Paul Treslow had indicated to me that he's expecting a local contractor to provide him with a quote, and then at which time a decision on proceeding will be determined unless otherwise advised by the board. And we have not received that. We did bid it out, and we got no responses to start with. So that's why then Steve approached Jameson Lewis about doing work.
Got that. So there's nothing keeping the second person from working off that bid to turn his bid in.
Well, I mean, the bids close on a certain date, so the bid process is technically over. So we were moving beyond that and
Negotiate.
Right. Yes. We could rebid it out, though, probably add a few weeks to the process and just see if we get any other proposals. Okay. All right, that was kind of Mr. Carter's thought at the time, that we weren't, going to get anybody to do the work, and Jameson Lewis said, yeah, we can try to fit you in. So.
Yeah, sounds reasonable.
Okay. All right, in terms of the new office building for DSS, building inspections, planning and zoning, CMA Architecture has begun work on the conceptual design and project definition phase, which included meeting with those departments on June 30th to refine their space needs. Other work to be done in this phase includes site assessment work and development of conceptual alternatives. The results will be compiled into a conceptual package to be shared at a meeting sometime in August with the project team, which would include staff from administration, buildings and grounds, social services, building inspections, planning and zoning, and up to 2 board members if desired. I would recommend the participation of at least 1 board member on that committee. So if you all want to think about that and talk about who might be, that would be great.
With what time frame?
We should be meeting probably in August at some point to go over the conceptual package.
I mean, unless somebody else wants to, I mean, I'm serving on social services anyway, so.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable for you to be on that one.
You want 1 or 2? It's
We can do 2, let's do
2
2.
fine.
Skip? We'll put Skip on there, he hasn't been on the building committee yet.
Yeah, okay. All right, so Mr. Carr, Mr. Garden. Great, thank you very much. All right, so the FY23 state budget amendment funding, there was a bill, HB 30, in the conference report amendment that provides for $250,000 in funding from the Department of Historic Resources to support planning for the development of a Vietnam War and Foreign Conflicts Museum in Nelson County. The funds will flow through the county, who's the fiscal agent, to the nonprofit Vietnam War and Foreign Conflicts Foundation. Members of the foundation will be meeting with DHR in the coming weeks to review details of the use of the money and reporting of the funds. The board endorsed support or provided support for this funding at this July 13, 2021 regular meeting. So those funds have come about. As far as the Director of Finance and HR position, we received 5 applications. 3 interviews are scheduled for later in the week with Mr. Reed and Mr. Rutherford participating. The Renaissance Ridge Housing Development, as of the first week of July, plans and a revised traffic report have been submitted to VDOT. Plans and permit applications for stormwater management have been submitted to DEQ, and copies of these submissions along with ENS fees were submitted to planning and zoning and building inspections. The developer also reported that the Army Corps of Engineers and FEMA LOMA permitting was in progress, as was environmental reporting. The project proposes to construct 136 units in a phased development process. The fiscal year 22-23 budget, the FY23 budget was adopted and appropriated on June 27, 2022. Staff is working to finalize adjustments within the accounting system to generate adopted budget reports for staff, public posting, and for rollover into the new fiscal year. The fiscal year 21-22 end of year, our auditors are conducting preliminary field work this week pertaining to the FY22 audit. On a cash basis, revenues exceeded expenditures by $2,760,826. The auditors will accrue back any FY22 related expenditures or revenues through the month of September, or 60 days beyond the end of the fiscal year. So that audited number will be different than this cash basis number. I also included preliminary revenue and expenditure detail reports as of June 30th and a preliminary analysis of our general fund balance with this report. Other department and office reports were also included with the 712 agenda document.
Great.
That was kind of long, but
Yeah.
any questions?
Any questions for Candy in regards to the reports at this time?
Oh, I did have one thing to add, I apologize. This happened as of this morning. Amanda and I had a phone call with Mark Smith of Architectural Partners regarding the Ag Center PAR. So where it stands right now is there was an 80% submittal of the work, and that was circulated for comments among the Nelson and Amherst stakeholders. And those are being compiled by Mark Smith. It was noted in our conversation that the majority of the comments were regarding the lack of exploration of the existing well or wells for their water capacity. And the expectation by the work group representatives was that this would be done as part of the study. So I advised Mark that the path forward included this exploration, and he said he would check on the cost and any logistics of evaluating those existing, what I said well or wells, so I'm not sure how many exactly there are on the property. And this would likely involve getting the landowner's permission to do the water drawdown testing. Staff will then take a more critical look at the scope of work provided by Architectural Partners, just to evaluate more closely whether or not this testing was a part of the original scope, as has been suggested by Amherst County. So we all agree that this project has become somewhat of a boondoggle, and that, you know, we're kind of in cleanup mode in that regard. So that's kind of where that stands today.
All right. Any more questions for Candy at this time? Okay, moving on to board reports. I promise, Skip, I won't make them go first. So Dave, you get to go first.
Well, we've already had a report on the EMS Council. I was unable to attend this month, but we can't get a report on that. And there's not really much, I don't know, do you ever, I never feel like there's much to report from social services to this board. I mean, they do their work, they do a great job, but I don't know if there's really anything to share with this board. I am excited to.
Are they, you know, are they participating fully in the design of the building facility?
Well, we're just getting to that point. In fact, that's when you and I are going to be serving on it. So
Yeah,
that's why I'm glad that we'll be able to be participating in that. So, but that's all I have.
Ms. Reed? Mr. Hardy? Mr. Barton? PDC, like I said, working on the regional housing partnership. We have really awesome conferences. I've told you guys before, and I'm going to tell you every month so we get there, so you're all Beyond that, nothing major to report on my end. Moving on to appointments. We have Mr. Reed's looking to get reappointed to Java. There is another applicant named Karen Weaver. It's my suggestion we just, Mr. Reed has been on there, so probably give him to serve another term, and maybe Mr. Reed could outreach to Karen and appoint her to wait.
Java also has a advisory.
So do you mind just outreaching to her? Yeah. All right. Can we get a motion to put Mr. Reed back on Java? So moved. Motion from Mr. Parr, is there a second? Second from Mr. Barton. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, let's do a vote by acclamation. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All right. Looks like this County Service Authority, Mr. Sherwood has resigned.
He will continue to serve till we find a replacement, but we do need to be actively pursuing a replacement.
Okay.
And he represents.
South
District. The
So-
South District.
Mr. Barton?
Yeah, he talked to me, and, he's gonna call me back, someone we would thought.
Sure.
Candy's gonna send out, you know.
We have to do the advertisement as
We
well.
will, yes, we will advertise.
Well, we're sorry to see that Mr. Sherwood has been a fixture there for a long time, so appreciate his service.
Thank you for his service.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we should
Send
write him a letter
We will.
that whenever we find his replacement. All right, moving on to existing vacancies, we have.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
I apologize. I was just gonna add that one thing that we, forgot to add to the appointments is we do have that third, Albemarle Charlottesville Regional Jail Representative position that needs to be filled, so.
Oh, yeah.
If the board, is inclined to appoint one of its members, or do we want to advertise and get a citizen representative?
I will.
What's that? You want to be on it? Okay. That does not impact me. Right?
Who do we have now?
Nobody's.
So currently it's myself and the sheriff.
Okay, so this would be a third one.
Third.
So the third one could be either,
Yeah, I think that's
citizen
fine.
rep or.
Mr. Barton nominate. I would nominate. Mr. Barton. All right, we nominated him, we need a second. Second, Mr. Harvey, any discussion? Here, no discussion, let's do a vote by acclamation. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any objections or abstentions? Hearing none. That's unanimous. Congratulations, Mr. Barton. You're getting put on all sorts of stuff now. Moving on to correspondence. David?
No, we're still, we got two more.
Oh, okay, yeah. So Nelson County Library Advisory Committee, there is no applicants at this time. This is your district, Mr. Harvey. So Ellen Boughton. So if you're looking for the North District, we're advertising for that. And Agricultural Forestful District Advisory Committee, Dr. Durdane. He passed away. And where did he?
There's no district.
No district.
It's a producer position. Mr. Reed and I have discussed it. It's kind of up to Mr. Reed.
Mr. Barton is already serving on the Ag and Forestry District, and I would be happy to serve on that until we get on someone to.
So let's continue to advertise and you be there.
Okay.
Is that fine? So continue to advertise that, Mr. Reed.
Historically been a difficult one to.
Oh, police.
Well, to a point.
Oh, yes,
We
it has.
had trouble recently getting someone to.
I feel like every year, it's always been that way.
Well, do you want to just put me on?
This is put Mr. Reed on. All right, so I'm putting Mr. Reed on.
If that, at least once.
Nominate Mr. Reed. Someone.
So moved.
Motion for Mr. Barr, second.
You can say.
I'm going to second for Ernie. I'm calling the question. Any discussion? Hearing none. Let's go ahead and all in favor of Ernie, say aye. Aye. Any discussion? Hearing none. Great, congratulations. Moving on to correspondence, Mr. Parr.
I have none.
All right, Mr. Reed.
Nothing.
Mr. Harvey? Mr. Barton? The only correspondence that I think I've gotten Lisa's plate as well as staff is in reference to the changing of the name of the library. At this time of discussion with our staff and other members of the James Madison Regional Library, the name change is no longer going to happen. So there's nothing that needs to happen. Nope. So that's the only correspondence I got now. Moving on to directives. Any directives? Mr. Parr, Mr. Reed, Mr. Harvey, Mr. Barton? No? All right, so we're going to be going into a closed session. This closed session is probably going to be a little bit of time, so I'm going to put us into a quick recess. And then we'll go into closed session.